everyone, it's Aaron Morrow here, local realtor in the greater Seattle area. Again, we've taken a couple weeks off. I don't know if you call that a season. We did like 12 episodes on our live. Took a couple weeks to reset. Had a couple of different things going on with Bryan and I with our schedules, including my wife had wisdom teeth extraction going on, and my kiddo just kept getting a couple of different illnesses going on. I got it. My family got it. Sister lives next door. Neither here nor there. We're back for another session, and I'm here to talk, especially since the market has gotten hotter. I'm going to bring Bryan back in here, but we're going to start talking about how what you could do to make your offer the most competitive if you find yourself in a multiple offer situation. So let me bring Bryan to the stage here. Bryan, welcome back.
Oh, you caught me drinking my coffee. Oh,
you got your coffee.
Right.
Everyone, if you hear anything outside of Bryan's window to demystify the situation, they're working on de-graffitiing Tacoma right now.
Somebody decided to show off their art skills, and let's just say it wasn't for everybody. It was definitely an interpretive piece.
Yep. I definitely saw it, and it definitely looks interesting here. Let me figure out, hold on, Bryan, do you mind talking just for a second while I figure out what's going on with why Instagram isn't working?
Yeah.
Give me 1 second.
So we're going to talk today about some strategies for negotiating in your to put yourself in the best position, and what happens if a deal kind of goes south in the middle of a transaction, like during an inspection or an appraisal or something like that, and how to negotiate through those things, especially in a market like this. I was just doing some research, as I want to do, and we have gone up in mortgage purchase activity this year to a place where we are currently just below. We're 11% below the amount of mortgage purchase application activity we had at this time last year, 45% lower than we were this time 2 years ago. And we are over 40% lower in mortgage purchase application activity. So people like submitting loans to purchase houses. We are over 40% lower than we were in 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. And then we're 11% lower than we were in 23. So demand continues to diminish with these higher rates, which is going to push supply up a little bit. But what that means is the demand on the sidelines, we saw a tick up in rates, or a tick down in rates, and a skyrocket of mortgage purchase application data. So we went from a number of 125, which is kind of, there's a whole lot of things that go into how they calculate this number and how this algorithm is set out. So let's say, for some perspective, at the height of the market in 2020, 2021, the mortgage purchase application data their number was 348. So I'm not going to bore you with what 0 means and what 1,000 means, but just for perspective,
right.
348. Right. At the beginning of this year, that number went down to 134. From 348 to 134. We spiked up to 174, down to 128. We're back at 148. We are still 11% below where we were last year, when we had some of the lowest purchase application activity on record. What that means, but the spike up before that, when rates had gone down from October into the end of January, we saw mortgage purchase application activity really spike up, and we've talked about that on this show. Currently, 55% of the market last year was first-time homebuyers. It's normally 32 to 33. Housing Wire came out with an article showing 55% of the market last year was first-time homebuyers. 97% of first-time homebuyers finance their house. They don't pay cash. So they are incredibly interest rate dependent. As rates tick down a bit, we've seen them rush back into the market. So inventory is climbing a bit over last year, still coming from historic lows. So it's like the tallest midget competition again. But as it ticks up with higher interest rates, that is going to be sucked off of the market with any move down in interest rates.
Did you just say the tallest midget competition?
I'm glad that's what you like to, yeah. It kind of is, right? The bar is so low you will trip over it.
Okay.
It's the shortest tall man competition.
The shortest tall man competition. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, I hope I don't have a big enough following that we get canceled, Bryan. Okay.
Anyway. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being a little person.
No,
You're just
I'm kidding.
person,
I'm kidding.
But
I'm kidding.
they're
yeah, no.
not tall by definition.
Yeah, no, of course. Anyways,
I don't know why that's
this is
wrong.
good. I think I'm drawing
It's
attention to
people.
it. Let's move on. Yeah, this is great. No, fantastic, Brian. Okay, fantastic. Well, based on what everything that Brian talked about, like I said, I'm gonna lead you guys into going over. We're gonna go over the nuts and bolts of what makes up like kind of the purchase and sale agreement in at least in the Northwest MLS. So if you're looking to buy a house in the greater Seattle area, King, Pierce, Snohomish counties, there's other counties involved, but these are the ones I work in. So all of these are going to have to do with you. Now, I'm not going to bore you with the nitty gritty details, all
Too
the
late.
pre-written real estate jargon. We're not going to touch that. You can read this stuff on your own terms, but I'm here to go over the stuff in the contracts that sellers are looking for that could help you get a leg up in your offer if you're up against the wall against like 20 other buyers and you really want a home. If that's the strategy you're looking for, if you're a buyer that's like, I don't want to play games or get into a bidding war, that this video is not really for you, because you need to go watch one of my other videos on how to avoid getting into a bidding war and look for the other houses that are either off market or have been sitting. But if you are like, I found the house and I want it, but there's 20 other people vying for it, even one other person, this is how to show you everything you can do in your offer to get a leg up on the other person. So we're going to go over it, and Brian's going to give me some dialogue from a lender's perspective to tell you guys what is also, from the financing perspective, what could also be risky too. Because we always tell clients, our job is to educate you on what the pros and cons are, what you could do, put into a real estate contract, and inform you on what you're doing. Because at the end of the day, what you're putting at risk is what's called earnest money when you're making an offer. And earnest money
Stop
is
right there.
like,
This is the first really important vocabulary word of the day.
Yes. So let's talk about it, right? So earnest money is kind of, I always explain it to my first time over as like, it's like a security deposit when you're getting into a rental. So it's like the money that you will put with the title and escrow company, the same company that's in charge of transferring home ownership from buyer to seller. They hold on to it till we tell them contractually what to do with it in writing. And there's only three things. Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Earnest money is incredibly important because it also caps the damages that you can incur from the seller if you don't act in good faith. So there are two options, if I'm not wrong, on page 1 of the contract.
There are. And
seller's election of remedies or earnest money, right?
I'll bring it right up here. Yeah, you could either do right here by default. So on line item 8, I'm bringing it right into here. On the purchase and sale agreement, with my buyers, we never choose the other option.
Now, why is it ever even on there? Yeah, if I don't do anything, you know what? Yeah, you tell me what you want. I've been doing this
for 10 years. I've been doing this for 10 years. We never check this, because checking this gives the seller the right to still also go after your earnest money and sue you.
Best case scenario, if it's seller election of remedies, that they only take your earnest money, but the earnest money's on there. Not that any of you would act in bad faith, all of our best friends watching these lives, but I don't know why it's on there. Nobody in their right mind would ever check that box.
Right. No. So like, even in the most competitive circumstances, this isn't something that a seller is looking for you to check. Like, if you're in an offer where there's, like, if any of you have been following my stories, that crazy bidding war that just happened in Bellevue where the house sold for 150% from list to sold price.
You guys, rates are in the 6s and 7s.
Even in that situation, even in that situation where the house was listed at $875,000 and it sold for $1.3 million and $5,000, that situation, I can guarantee you, no one was checking that box, and the seller was like, "Oop, that's my person I'm going after." Seller isn't looking after this. This is like low on the totem pole. Seller's not caring after this, because if you structure your offer right, a seller is looking for other stuff in the offer for strong earnest money. And that's,
can we talk about some strategies around earnest money too?
Yeah, and we're definitely going to go over that. I actually have a checklist here. It's like a writing a strong offer checklist here.
All right.
I've simplified it. I don't want to like show off like my proprietary version.
Yeah.
But this is kind of just like a breakdown here, and we've kind of updated it. We're constantly like tweaking it and adding some stuff. There's
Yeah.
a few things that we can like add in here, including like negotiation of compensation, either on buyer side commissions or seller side commissions too. Sometimes that can sweeten the pot for people. But by the way, anyone, I forgot to mention, this is multi-streamed right now. We have a lot of people that are watching on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, and Clapper right now. So if you're watching on some of the platforms where you can only see me, most people can see everything right now. But if you're on like Clapper, go to YouTube right now. So you can.
You don't
want
want to see me. You don't want to see me.
Yeah.
Oh, you want to see the
Yeah,
screen.
but
Yeah.
you want to see the screen so we can go over this together.
Yes, 100%.
Right? Yeah, so we're definitely gonna go over this information, and but you know what? Since we're talking about it, why don't we go over some earnest money stuff? So this is the biggest one that you can do. Now this is one I get so nervous on to do with earnest money. But this is written in here. It's been checked. You could decide to do what's called a full release of earnest money to the seller. It's such a power move to just say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I'm so confident and strong in our offer that will close on your property that one of the things I'm negotiating is not only a large sum of earnest money, but I'm just giving it to you. Here you go. Now, here's the thing, though. As a buyer, here's the main reasons why I, as an agent, say, like, in your toolkit of things that you're gonna do, like this is your nuclear option, because like your earnest money is like your only poker chip or your negotiating thing that you have. If you give it all away to the seller up front,
yeah,
there's nothing stopping that seller. If you do not close, if your lender cannot close your deal for any reason on your closing date, there is nothing stopping the seller from just moving on from the sale, or have
Taking
found a different buyer within that time frame and just getting that house under contract with a different buyer. Especially,
you gotta have a really good relationship with your lender, and probably have this post appraisal.
Yes, yeah. Now there are a couple of things that you could do to maybe not do such a what I would consider a baller move like this. There are some other things that you could do where you make the earnest money non-refundable, but not released. So that wording would look like basically saying the earnest money is non-refundable. You're not going to get it back, but at least it's tied up with escrow still. It's not in the seller's hands. So you still have to, in writing, have everything checked out. The seller doesn't just have Bernie Madoff with your earnest money and then have no recourse of trying to just get it back in the event that the seller doesn't perform on you.
Like Bernie, they just made off.
Yeah, they just made off with your earnest money, you know. So like that is a small inherent risk. So this is the most risky thing you can do with earnest money, but it is a power move. So it's worth discussing all the pros and cons of doing it.
If you do this, you must do it with a suitcase filled with cash, and you must slide it over to the seller, or you meet them at the airport with like the same suitcase, but theirs is empty, yours is full. You set down the full one, pick up the empty one, they pick up the full one. You have to do it very 007, like if you're going to release your earnest money. That's just the law. Like that's just what the law says. You have to do 007 style.
Just the law. You just got to slide it under the table. No. And by the way, I'm going to disclose, by the way, anything that I'm sharing with you right now. You have not hired Bryan or I right now as giving you legal real estate advice. So I'm just throwing this out here. You are taking your.
We just gave you that suitcase trick for free, is what he's saying. Yeah. You didn't hire us. We gave you the airport suitcase trick
the verbiage
on the house.
What I'm saying is the verbiage I'm showing you is a recommendation. You have to make sure that when you are being properly represented by your buyer's agent or your real estate attorney, to make sure that the language that you are using in your contracts have been ran by either them or their managing broker. Don't just take what I have here, because I am throwing this out here. I am not going to be held liable if you're just snapshotting language I'm giving you right now.
I'm not liable if you don't 007 your earnest money.
Yeah, exactly. So this is
You're-
one power move that you can do with your earnest money. You can either make it non-refundable or release it early. A few things that we've done with negotiating tactics with sellers in the event, there's been several deals where like I've worked with some home buyers that unfortunately when they've decided that they're going to work with a bank that is notorious for not closing on time, it goes and the bank doesn't close on time in that event, the seller or the buyer, to keep the deal going, had to negotiate some of like a release of their earnest money to the seller in exchange for an extension of time to keep the contract going.
And okay,
And
I'll
that's
just say
pretty normal
that's
around.
reasonable.
Yeah.
That's reasonable.
That's very
Hey, I didn't
reasonable.
perform on this part of the contract, so it's going to cost me
buyer did not
something to
perform.
now renegotiate.
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
That makes
Right. The
sense.
buyer did not perform. Yeah.
And you release it or you make it non-refundable,
Right.
it still comes back to you if you close. So you're saying,
Right.
hey, I'm still confident I can close, but for a little bit extra assurance and some insurance on my side towards you, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, if I can't make this happen, you can keep my earnest money.
Now,
That seems
a few
that's
things
reasonable.
in everything that we're talking about with earnest money, you can do any combination of. Some buyers, after coaching them through this, they say, hey, Aaron, what we want to do if we know we're in a multiple offer situation, because what I do for my clients to put them in the best position possible is I research the crap out of the multiple offer situation we'll probably be in. So the house that they like, I mean, I will really quickly run you through a 2-minute scenario of like the type of situation we go through. We first have researched the type of house they want to get. I've made sure that there's most likely a good chance that it can go with the type of financing they want before they've even seen it. Then I'm like, okay, house checks out. Let's go see it in person. Clients fall in love with it. They're like, Aaron, we want it. Okay, let me do some recon. Follow up with the agent. Turns out 4 other offers coming in. They're reviewing offers on next Wednesday. Awesome. Okay, so I'm getting as much info out of the listing agent as I can.
Calling this agent's high school counselor. Hey, was this person somebody who told the truth normally? What kind of
I
student?
am working with the listing agent as good as I can, and I believe in being honest and upfront with the listing agent as much as I can, so then they are divulging as much as they will with me. Win-win scenario. And then, because if it comes down to apples and apples, it's my if it's my offer against 20 other offers, and mine is like in that 1 or 2 position, but then we have this really good relationship going with clear communication, that agent is going to feel confident moving forward with us because we had our ducks lined up. We had our lender reach out to the agent. That agent feels comfortable, confident in our client's financing. Our client has their financing lined up. Folks, everything that you're doing when you're crafting these offers, it's an art form. You have to have...
It's not just highest price wins. It really isn't.
No.
Highest price with a really difficult agent on the other side means you may not get to closing. And if you do, you're going to be bloodied and bruised and have come down in price. And you're going to, like a listing agent knows that, and they're still protecting their client, even if they don't take the highest offer, because the experience and knowing that it's actually going to happen, because nobody gets anything. The seller doesn't get any money. The buyer doesn't get to move any house if the agent stands in the way and doesn't get the deal closed and doesn't meet your expectations. And some people really just think the more of a hard ass I am, the better negotiator I am. It couldn't be further from the truth.
Exactly. And unfortunately, there's so many situations that we find ourselves in where there's other agents that are just getting in their client's way. So
I see it on the lending side a lot.
Yeah, I do see it a lot too. So with that being said, what I was gonna just say about the earnest money, a couple of things that you can do after figuring out like how much you're offering with the earnest money. Some clients decide that maybe they do like a partial, some earnest money is non-refundable. I have a lot of clients where I feel a lot more comfortable where maybe they negotiate some of the earnest money is non-refundable after a certain timeline is met. So, for instance, the appraisal's been satisfied. You know, that's a good area where if you're confident in the lender you're working with and you're confident in your financing, then it should be a smooth sailing ship from there. Once you know that the appraisal is going to go through, which we have. Just that's kind of a nice plug-in for a bonus. Anyone that's sticking to the end of this video, Bryan is
Oh, wait, there's more.
yeah. Bryan is gonna have a really cool thing to talk about with what he's doing with his
I'm
company
going to
with appraisal gaps. Yeah.
We've got some really good appraisal protection insurance if you're worried about the property not appraising and how that might affect you and how much money you'll have to come out with closing or how much your payment might go up or down. Mortgage math is not regular math, you guys. So we're going to bring you through our appraisal insurance strategy.
Cool. So we'll get back to that real quick, though. Let me take you through this. And we spent a lot of time on earnest money, but you know what? It's super important to understand what you can do with earnest money because it's the biggest thing, as we've shown you. It's worst case scenario. It should only ever be the thing that you are losing in a deal as a buyer if you've done something you are not supposed to do. That's the worst case scenario. You should never be in a situation where you're getting sued by a seller. But, so I say should, right? If you're working with someone like myself and Bryan, or a reputable, a realtor, you've been educated properly, there should only be two things that happen with that earnest money. Either it goes towards any of your upfront costs at closing, or if you actually owe less at closing than that earnest money amount is, you should get a refund back at closing. Or
it's your money.
If you leave the deal in a way you're contractually allowed to, which all of, knock on wood, my desk is wood. If you leave the deal in a way you're contractually allowed to, you get the earnest money back, contractually speaking. There's nothing in the contract that there's nothing that the seller has a leg to stand on. Now, the seller, both parties have to sign and agree to who releases it to, but even if the seller took you to arbitration, there's no way they would win because it's just crystal clear. There's no like.
If you acted in good faith and in one of the contingencies that Aaron puts in your offer was not met, you are allowed to back out of the contract and have your earnest money returned. Now the seller may drag their feet on that, but you know you're allowed.
And if the seller is trying to hold on to it in bad faith and take you to arbitration, they're going to get more fines on them in arbitration and lose. And I've actually seen it happen, not to any of my buyers, thankfully, but some other people's buyers.
Can they put their house on the market when they're in arbitration for a previous contract?
You know what? That's a good question. I've never came across that. I'd have to ask my broker.
Let's look it up. Yeah, let's look it up and we'll put it in the notes.
I do know a buyer can, if a buyer's in arbitration, can still go under contract on new properties because
that makes sense.
Their previous earnest money is just tied up in escrow still, but they can still buy something else. But good question. We should we'll look it up, and I'm gonna even pin Bryan's. I'm gonna answer his question on YouTube in the comments. So, or Bryan might be looking up why I'm doing this right now.
Nope.
Okay.
I'm not good on that. I need a professional.
Okay, we'll look it up later.
Yeah.
Anyways, seller's disclosure form. So this is a form that's most sellers have to fill out. There are certain circumstances where a seller or a property does not have to fill this out. Primarily, if the property is an estate sale, they do not have to fill this out. But anytime they're exempt from it. But 99% of the properties, if they're not in a estate sale, they're gonna have to be filling this out. And what's gonna happen is this is just a form. As you can see here, there's like 100 questions on here, and the seller has to answer yes, no, don't know, or non-applicable. And this is an important document because it tells, it's the seller answering in good faith their honest knowledge of what the condition of the property is in, right? So what's good about this form is at the bottom here for a buyer, there's 3 lines here that you can sign here. Line 1 gives you the option to basically, it's acknowledging that you received this document. And if you just sign line 1, you actually get 3 business days to review it and back out if you don't like something on it. To improve your offer, like one thing that you can do to make your offer stronger is you could also sign line 2, where you're acknowledged that you've received this and you're waiving your right to back out due to anything on this form. So I have a lot of clients that sign option 2 because they read through it, they're like, okay, that's cool. I never recommend a client signing option 3, because what option 3 will do is it basically takes the seller off the hook for actually being honest on this form and giving you a completed document. So signing line 3 basically doesn't help you if you have to take the seller to small claims court after closing on the property. This is one of the biggest pieces of documents that you'd use right after closing on the property if you found something wrong with the property that the seller didn't disclose properly to you, and you needed to use this in court, basically. So line 1 and 2, signing both of these, it helps improve your offer by basically saying, look, I'm serious here, I want your property, I'm not going to take 3 days to review this and back out on it. But
why is that important to a seller?
Well, anytime you have a contingency in place in your offer where you as a buyer are allowed to back out on them, it's not good to the seller, because the more things you have in your offer where you can back out on them, anytime a buyer backs out on a seller, they have to put their house back on the market. And anytime they've tied up their property where they've taken their house off the market and put it back on the market, most of the time it hurts the seller financially, where the large majority of the time they are going to have to sell their house for less money than they would have originally gotten with the first buyer. It's always in the seller's best interest to find the right buyer the first time around and get the transaction completed the very first time with the first buyer. It's very rare that a seller will get more money with the second or third buyer than they would have gotten if they found the right first buyer under contract.
Mark Twain said something along the lines of, a lie is halfway around the world before the truth puts on its shoes, or something like that.
Yeah.
And what that means is that rumors spread fast. And so if a house has been off the market a couple of times, well, other agents are going to make their own conclusions about why. And it could be true or false. Maybe they took buyers who didn't have good financing approvals, or who lost their job, or ended up finding out they had a baby and wanted to move back home to be near their parents. Could be a million reasons that don't have anything to do with the property, which is why this having not taking the full 3 days to review something like this, you don't really need 3 days to review, allows a seller to understand that you're, 1, serious, and 2, the expedience of your review means that if they do have to put it back on the market, they can get it back on right away. So it doesn't, rumors don't start to spread about, well, once they kind of got into this house and maybe they did an inspection and maybe they did appraisal, or maybe. And that's why this house came back on the market. So we're going to go with a lower price.
For sure. 100%. Yep. Absolutely. With that being said, so I think we've covered seller's disclosure form, what you can do with that. I have a few items to mention just on the purchase and sale agreement alone, which is Form 21. This is the form real quick. As you can see here, there's a lot to this form. And just to kind of show you guys here, all of this stuff here is stuff that I, as a realtor, fills in. And then all of this stuff I do not touch. This is like the pre-written Washington State real estate jargon that's written by the Northwest MLS attorneys. I always tell my clients to read through it, but I go over it with my clients, but we just don't manipulate it. That being said, there are a few things that I'm going to point out here that you could help with your contract here. So we kind of covered what to do with earnest money. It's kind of just a general standard in the area that a minimum customary amount. Again, there's no set standard here. a lot of people do 1% as like a pretty standard average as one, uh, earnest money, but you could always offer more if you're in a competitive situation. Um, and one new thing that they recently did, I think a year ago, is they updated this where it used to be it was just always 2 days here, and now you can negotiate. So I always have clients just
By 2 days, you mean like how long the buyer
how
has
long
what's
it
their
takes
contract,
to put it into
the escrow account.
escrow. So
Mhm.
if you're a client that you have everything lined up and you're like, hey Aaron, I could deposit as soon as we go under contract the next day, when if we go under contract like on Monday, Tuesday I'm ready to talk to escrow and get it going. You can put 1 day here, and that could help you. Because every small thing that you're doing in these offers, if the listing agent is crafty at what they're doing and they're looking, if they work like our team and they have a whole Excel spreadsheet to go over every single offer with their client on what all the good pros and cons of every offer, because sometimes you might have a deal where literally the only difference came down to that, you know um these are things that you can be doing, so it's just these small differences that could make a difference in your offer.
I
um
would say every small edge you can get, take it. Because like you said,
yeah,
it may come down to just this same price, same closing
right,
costs, same closing
right,
date, same
right,
sort of financing or whatever. But if you could
right,
just like, single, double, and then you got a good inning going.
right.
Little
same with
things.
Same with I always recommend just by default use the same title and escrow company that the listing agent and the seller are recommending. Don't make it hard on the seller if they already have title opened with someone. Uh, Go with who they're recommending. That's kind of basically like what people do around here as the standard. Now, again, if you're not in a multiple offer situation, that's different. If you want to use your own title and escrow, that's fine. Now, what I would always recommend as an asterisk, have your agent, if it's not a well-known title and escrow company, have your agent just double check, make sure they're reputable, right? I'm just gonna throw that out there because sometimes you have it where like it's titles with like a well-known title company, like either, well, I'm not gonna throw out names, but like one of the well-known big names, and then all of a sudden you get this escrow company that's not even like with an attorney company, but or like,
Mhm.
but it's like this weird mom and pop company that you've never heard of, and you're like, oh,
We've had a
okay,
lot of problems with that sort of thing.
I need to look into that for you because maybe they're
Yeah.
gonna be biased and hold on to that resume. So with that
Well,
asterisk, just
also,
have right,
yeah, you don't know as a buyer anything about escrow. How could you? You do this
right,
once, twice, 5 times in your life. Aaron does this
right,
every single day. We do this every day. Like a
right,
difficult, maybe not difficult security. They may be wonderful people, but if they're too
right.
small and too slow, we've had problems where there situations like, no, we can't close today because it's in a different county.
Right.
Like, what?
Yeah.
I don't understand
Yep.
what that has to do with anything at all. Like, get a carrier or e-record, or like, there's a million other ways you can do it. Or, hey, it's just the two or three of us here. We can't get to your buyer's closing documents for another 3 days. Well, our closing date is in 4 days, and they have to schedule their own work schedules and their families. Like, listen to Aaron on when he talks to you about which escrow title company, because while it may seem like they're all the same, they absolutely are not. And if it's a company that just is going to maybe throw some wrenches in there later on, uh, save yourself the headache.
Things to just look into, but obviously,
Mhm.
if you're trusting the realtor that you're looking into and know that they're looking into, have them look into it. But these are just general advices. Use in general, if you can trust your realtor and they're saying go with the escrow company, title and escrow that the seller's using. Again, it's just one. What we're trying to do is make the offer like what's the easiest offer in a pile of offers for the seller to be like, I'm picking you, right?
Yeah, give them an
um
easy yes, and
yep.
give them enough yeses to where they're just continually saying yes to all the terms of your
Also
offer.
make it where they don't have to. Here's one thing, I haven't even put this in here, but make it where there's no needed any sort of extra initials. So like another thing, work with an agent that we don't need to send any housekeeping items back and forth that need cleaned up or anything. Because sometimes listing agents and sellers, they will literally, if there's two offers on the table that are like the exact same, but one, they meant the same thing as the other person, but it actually just needs a counter offer to be clarified, they're gonna go with the other offer that didn't need clarified, because they didn't need to send it back to get the buyer to initial something to clarify it. So we need to send that contract right the first time, squeaky clean, no additional initials needed. Don't miss any of your signatures. Like, send it perfect the first time, so the seller's like, you made this simple for me. Everything's signed. It's good to go. Yeah. Anyways, right here. So this is another thing. Where was I? Right here. Okay. So we talked about strongest possible earnest money. Talked about title and escrow. Right here, 21, 30-day close or sooner. I actually had this on my Form 21. This has been part of my checklist, but I've had this in here for years. I've started like saying, hey, if you can find a lender that can do less than 30 days, Brian, my guy over here, he's done 2 weeks before, folks.
10
I'm not like
days, two
saying
weeks. Yeah.
he's so if you can find a lender that can now I wouldn't now if Brian said he could do 10 days, I'm not going to put that in the contract. Like what we would probably do to give him a buffer, I would put like 15 because I don't want to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it, even that, if Brian was like, Aaron, I could do 10 days on this, my buyer's solid, they've got all
Mhm.
their ducks lined up in a row, we're ready to go. If we put 15 on that contract, I guarantee you are going to be like the best financial uh you are going to be the best financial offer as far as a closing date. Now, the only thing that might be more competitive against you is if there's cash offers, but I'm not talking about any other sort of like on pricing or any other things. I'm just talking about merely on how many days to closing, right?
Mhm.
So if you can find a lender that is good at what they do, you get your ducks lined up with that lender. Find a lender that can tighten up the closing date for you. Any time that we
And
can
and
tighten
be
that
a
up is good.
participant in that as a buyer.
Yes.
You
Yep.
have to participate. You've got to be
Right.
available. You've got to realize that you're buying a house. There's a lot of times where
Right.
people will ask us for money and then forget that they did, I think. But you got to remember you're buying a house, have a lender who's proactive, and then match that proactivity yourself.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. 100%. So, if you could put 15 on here, great, put it cuz that's going to look super in let's just touch on it real quick. Anytime the shortest closing on top of everything else, that's a lot of aspects for most sellers, that is what a seller's looking for. Um
Yeah.
Most sellers like that. Now, there are some sellers. This is the thing. This is why you gather intel, because when you're working with a realtor like me, I'm trying to find out what the seller wants. Because there are some sellers out there that do want either a longer closing or
Yeah, we run into that
alternatively,
quite often.
yeah, or alternatively, they want a quick close so they can have the cash, but they want what's called rent back, or they want to have possession after closing. So allowing possession after closing is something that you can do,
I
and
think that is an incredibly strong negotiating spot in this market where people are really worried about, hey, I can sell my house fast, but I may not be able to buy a house quite as
with
fast.
how low inventory is. So
Yeah, you get
basically, what you're doing in layman's terms is you are contractually turning your seller into a renter once you
mhm.
become a landlord. So it's extremely powerful in a deal, and I've had so many buyers win deals where they weren't the highest offer, where the seller took their deal because they offered them this, and that was way more worth it to the seller than getting even $20,000 more on the property because of how easy it made it. Now, we're not just talking about offering 5 more days to move out. I'm talking about buyers who have offered sellers an extra like 2 months to get out of their to find another property and get out. Now, with that said, there's a couple ways you could structure it depending on how crazy the deal is. everything's negotiable on those. So you could either structure it where it's a free rent back, where like literally you are charging nothing to the seller. Now, the main con to that is you are footing your bill on your mortgage.
And your utilities.
Now, and the utilities, yes. Now, Bryan, correct me if I'm wrong here. Your first mortgage payment typically doesn't start for a month, right? Till the month after you've closed, right?
Yeah, there's a couple ways that can work. If you close the very beginning of the month, you can have a thing called an interest credit, so you have a little bit less closing costs. And then say you close at the very beginning of April, since that's coming up, your first payment could be due then in May. Or if you close a little bit later, say the middle to the end of the month, say you close a month from now, April 15th, your first payment's not actually due until June. And it's not due until June 15th. Like June 1st to June 15th is your grace period before you get any sort of late fee. After the 15th or after 30 days late, then it gets reported to credit. But after the 15th, you just have a late fee. So you really have, if you close on April 15th, you have 60 days until that first mortgage payment is due with no penalty to you.
Which is awesome. And by the way, just to give you a small correction, Bryan, there's without modifications to it, the renter, the seller does agree to pay the utilities.
All right.
And
this is why we have you.
Yeah, at least you wouldn't have to pay the utilities. Here is the small inherent risk to this, and I always go over the pros and cons with my buyers, right? There is always an inherent risk that because you become a landlord, they become a tenant. What happens if they leave the place a little trashed once you leave, right? Well, now you're dealing with a situation where you might have to take the seller to a small claims court on how they left your property, right? Because there's not, it's in here, they're not going to make any improvements or alterations to the property, including painting during the term of the agreement with the commission. There's a lot of stuff in here that we could read through that try to help protect you on this, but there is always an inherent risk where someone is living in your property. You own it now, they don't own it anymore, right? Most of the time, I will let you know, it works out, it's fine, but I think things you want to keep in mind is get a feel for the situation and who, like, the type of sellers are before you're throwing this into your offer. You know what I mean? So things you might want to look out for, okay? When you're going through a property, I'm not like, this isn't profiling or anything like that. But like, get a good sense of when you're walking through the property that you're going to make an offer on. You walk through the property. A lot of the times people leave their photos up. Just you as the home buyer, you get your own feeling for how comfortable you are with the seller. And based on talking to the agent, the listing agent, the type of vibe they are, you can tell, you can make your own conclusions or decisions on if you're comfortable with this type of seller being the type of person you want to take that risk with. If the seller leaves a lot of stuff, I'm going to throw out there, sometimes there's like more like a hoarder or pack rat. That's probably a property that's a little bit riskier to do a long rent back on, unless you want to just be like, hey, I'm assuming this property with all of the inherent junk, no matter what they leave on it. Another situation you might get yourself in is if you get yourself in a situation where you've taken possession of the property, though, with a hoarder or a pack rat. There could be that small risk that the person does not leave the property after the rent back's done. And
there's inherent risk in all of this, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just throwing this out here as pros and cons. Now, not to get down a rabbit hole of this, the very large majority of home buyers that do this, it's fine, right? But you just have to you have to be knowledgeable and not just generally do this. I've had 3 buyers that have done this recently in the last couple months, worked out totally fine, but these are just things that they look at this holistically before they make this decision of putting it into their offer. Okay, so we're going to move on from that. If anyone has any questions, feel free, guys. I see a lot of people watching. So if you have any questions, throw them in the chat, and we'll be chatting with you.
Some of the things we're talking about here are ways to negotiate outside of just purchase price. So
Yes.
you
Yeah.
have to find. Aaron talked about the recon that he does and the research that he does to find the seller's pain and pleasure points, and then have those kind of in holster. So you want to lead, of course, with the carrot. We'd love to give you this. We'd love to give you this. We'd love to give you this.
Right.
And if things go south, you retain the stick. But negotiation is really about getting everybody most of what they want, and
Right.
you
Absolutely.
know, understanding what position you are in the negotiation. So the more appealing and easier you can make it for a seller to say yes, the more likely you are, obviously, to win that offer, even if you don't have the highest price.
Absolutely. Okay, one last thing on this form real quick before we move on to financing contingency is right here, information verification period. One thing that you can do to just tighten up your offer, and I'm glad that they updated this form on this because they made it a lot more crystal clear. Before you were having to cross out this pre-written legal jargon down here, and I didn't like crossing anything out down here. Now it's
It
negotiable.
does
So
really.
here, oh, uh-oh. I think I lost Bryan for a sec. I will wait to see if he comes back. Oh, Bryan, I lost you for a sec. What'd you say?
All right, I said it does really feel shady when you got to slide a contract over to your buyer and a bunch of it's crossed out.
Yeah,
like, I
know.
swear, I'm not being. It's just I have to. Like, I know. Yes, I know how this looks too.
So this used to apply. Let me see if it's still in here. Item W right here. Yeah. So this used to be like we were like a lot of clients were like to make their offer better. They used to just cross this out. Like this doesn't exist anymore. And it's like so this applies to item W down here. It's an official. So you either by default you get you can say how many days you get. It used to be by default. It's just in there. You had 10 days. It was written in. You had 10 days to verify the accuracy of the listing info. So basically anything that was in that the listing agent put in the listing, it was to allow you to basically verify the information was accurate. So if you found out like, that listing agent was, like, or that listing and seller was definitely not showing that off properly, you could back out of your deal and get your earnest money back due to this form. Now, if you do some of your research quickly up front on all of that listing items, it takes more work for your buyer's agent, but happy to do it if we're in a multiple offer situation to help improve your offer. Go in baller like, and what everyone, what serious buyers are doing in multiple offer situations, they're saying this is satisfied. I don't need 10 days to back out on you on this, because sellers get nervous on this. They're like, hey, we're pretty sure we filled that out pretty properly, but there might be some people that try to get out on technicalities on that for no, so because here's the thing, there's just a few bad apples on both sides of that sounds bad, on both sides of the aisle, when it comes to buyers and sellers, right? So in that regards, that's one thing that you can do to improve your offer. And by default, with talking to my home buyers, most of my home buyers decide in multiple offer situations after reviewing the listing properly together, they decide to waive that or satisfy that. Okay, moving on to financing. All right, this is where a lot of input is going to come from Bryan, and it's going to be interesting getting a lot of his take on it. So 22A, I know conventional financing strongest if possible. We have this on here though, but it's kind of a little misnomer. We throw this.
I will tell you, it is not. It is. Can I please, if any agents are listening right now, an FHA or a VA or a USDA buyer is not any less qualified than a conventional buyer. In fact, we get more deals to closing with FHA than we do with conventional because the guidelines allow for more people. They're not less qualified. The money that you get at the end, Mr. Seller, Mrs. Seller, Mr. or Mrs. or Mrs. Listing Agent or Ms. Listing Agent, is the same color green. It doesn't matter. This is one of my biggest pet peeves.
It's my biggest pet peeve on it. We have this just because it's the easiest to not have to fight against and explain away in a multiple offer situation when we're talking to the list. However, I will throw this out here. I'm such an advocate for all of my other types of loan products, and I win multiple offer situations so many times on all those other loan types. So like I am never like Bryan knows me, my huge like I would say my profile of home buyers that I work with, it's probably like 38% conventional and then like the rest is spread out between FHA, VA, the rest of
Mhm.
them.
If you have
So
some worries about your property appraising, yeah, conventional appraisals won't stick with your property. So that's a thing. Okay. If you have some worries about, yeah, I mean, there's some chip paint, like people, there's an old school thought that the FHA appraisal process is so difficult that they're going to pick your property apart and you have to do a whole bunch of like little ticky tack things. That is not the case anymore. Conventional appraisals have gotten much more conservative, and FHA appraisals have gotten much more liberal, and they've met nearly in the middle. Now, there are some things on
yeah,
FHA that are
right.
important, but like it is so, um, it it's such a, I don't, it's so frustrating when it's one or another and someone says, well, it's conventional. I'm going to take the conventional because it's a better profile buyer. You have no idea. Like you have
I
no
agree.
idea
And
about
a
that
lot
buyer.
of the times it's so frustrating when it comes down to that. So that's why what we do to combat that is um and I like that we're having this open dialogue about it because anytime that I'm working, unfortunately, anytime I have an FHA, VA, USDA, anytime I'm representing or putting forth any of those offers with those types of financing, you
Mhm.
best believe I am packaging that and selling it so well when it comes
Can I,
to a multiple offer
yeah.
situation.
Can I give you
Um,
a
Go
little
ahead.
inside info on VA appraisals too?
Yeah, go ahead.
So the VA appraisal process, it takes the longest. They have the longest to complete the appraisal. They have 10 days to get it assigned to appraiser and then 14 days to complete it. So there's some times where it takes a while to get it. And that can make everybody antsy. Oh my gosh, the appraisal's not in, the appraisal's not in. The longer it's not in, the more they think there's going to be a problem with it. I don't know why, but it's human nature. Are you still there? Did I lose you? Okay.
Yeah, I'm here.
The VA is the only financing type that will tell you whether or not the appraisal is going to come in low before they send it to you and give you a chance to make your case for the purchase price that you're in contract for. They will
Right.
send you and say they'll reach out to us, the lender, and say, "Hey, we don't think we're going to get to value on this. Can you please contact the agents and have them send the comps that they use to get to this price?" That's
Right.
awesome.
Yeah.
And if it still comes in low, if the appraiser's like, actually, I look at these differently and the agents look at these for whatever reason, we can then contact the VA directly and say, hey, we think that this is a low, this appraised value is lower than it should be. Here's what the veteran thinks. Here's the comps. Are you guys okay with raising the value? And we have had a lot of success with low appraisals coming up to value appraisals and coming up to bridge the gap between what it was and what the purchase price is. And that is with no other loan type, no other
Right.
loan type other than VA, which
Right.
makes it so much more secure. And a lot of agents have no idea about it. A lot of lenders have no idea about that. There's a lot of times that we have won deals because we are able to, with integrity, present our case about we think this appraiser is wrong, and then have the VA agree with us and say, you know what, yes, we do. Because appraisers are just people. Like they make mistakes and they have their own biases, and you're dealing with the public. So that's something about VA loans that they're like, oh, I don't know the VA appraisal. That's going to be so rough. Actually, it's the best part of all the appraisal processes for every loan type. Sorry, I'm going to be
I
on a
absolutely love it. Hey, Bryan,
soapbox for
say
this.
say it one more time because you buffered. Say it's the best.
Oh, it is the best appraisal situation of all of with comparing all loan types and all appraisal situations. It is the best for the seller by far.
Awesome. You heard it from Bryan, folks. And he's like one of the top lenders in the state, by the way. Not to toot his
Yeah.
horn, but
Well, Ashley is. I
throwing
just do
that out
podcasts with you.
there. I'm just turning you into a podcaster now. No.
Yeah.
Okay, so this one is super easy, but like it's kind of the first to go. Like it's a no-brainer. If you're in a multiple offer situation, you're not gonna win if you're a buyer asking for closing costs. Like it's just it's it's not
It's
gonna
tough.
happen. Like if you have joined a multiple offer situation and you're a buyer that's like, well, here's my offer, but I need you to pay my closing costs. Unless, I will say this, okay? If you increase your purchase amount to offset asking for the closing costs, I have buyers win multiple offer situations that way. If the multiple offer situation isn't so crazy where um, it would bring the purchase amount so high up that it's just dogpiling offers in there where it just doesn't even make sense for the seller to run the numbers on it. Like, unfortunately, like, there's sometimes been situations where like they've been like, I've had listing agents call me up and be like, Aaron, honestly, I had 40 offers. Yours was somewhere in the middle of the pack, and I didn't want to even bother running the numbers of the final count on it because of that, because of the closing costs. So
Love the transparency. Thanks for the feedback,
yeah,
man. Now I can go back to my
yes,
buyer and let them know.
yep, exactly. And that's the thing. I track this stuff. So after winning or losing every offer, it's a game. After, I'm always calling the listing agent and emailing to figure out where we were in the pack, tracking the stats, and figuring out nitty-gritty details on what we did to improve. And this is what I do with every client to help them. If they don't win the first deal or the second, they're getting the third one. You know what I mean? Like, every time. Um, so, well, knock on wood. But if they keep taking my advice and we keep making those incremental improvements, you know. Okay, so then right here, we needed additional down payment. Okay, yeah. So we said this, or raise purchase price if contributions are needed. So we talked about that. Like, that's a strategy you can do if you need the contributions. You can raise your purchase price to cover that. Keep in mind, some sellers get super nitpicky on this. Some listing agents get super nitpicky on this, and they come back to me and say, Aaron, there's a buyer's agent compensation, there's a seller's agent compensation. Let's just say they're charging, in this specific transaction example, it's 6%. They're saying, Aaron, you've gone from 500,000 to 520,000 to cover the difference, but that 6% amount is now on a different amount, right? Because now it's covering
So nominally different. I need $10,000 more in closing costs.
Yeah. So there's
6%
two
of
things
10,000
you
is
can
not the
do.
reason.
You can
I'm not
either
raising
have,
the purchase price to make more money.
right. You can either have a buyer, so you can either do the math and calculate out that penny amount to like cover the difference, right, of that nominal difference. Or sometimes what I do for my clients, just to be nice, is I put in the contract that the compensation's based on the I will put in that the compensation is based on purchase price minus concession, just to be super nice and like have it be super simple so they don't have to math. And then uh it's like, then it wasn't anything for them to complain about, or the seller to like, then it's a non-issue. You know what I mean? So these are things I'm doing with my clients to help them and go above and beyond on the buyer side to help them win deals. You know what I mean? Okay, let's talk about this. So 22A, let's go to it real quick. I'm sure you see this all the time, but they've kind of updated terms. And this is the financing contingency. So there's two things that you can do on this form. And it's all negotiable, folks. So you could either do A or B here. And a lot of people, if they're in a non-competitive situation, they owe it, it's in the buyer's best interest to be A. And if you're a buyer that you really want to be protected through your whole transaction, you're gonna put, if you're a 30-day close, you're gonna put 30 days here. But if you're a serious buyer and you want the seller to actually like go under contract with you, you're probably gonna leave this blank. And I'm trying not to go into like a whole other like getting into a crazy rabbit hole on this because sometimes I could take 15 or 20 minutes explaining this form right here with clients. Um, but basically, leaving this blank after 21 days, it gives the seller the opportunity to request for you to waive your financing. And then you have 3 business days to get back to them whether or not you're going to do it. And after 3 days, if you say, yes, I'll do it, moving forward, that's fine. We move forward, everything's good. If you don't do it, and you say, no, I'm not doing it, the seller can either move forward with you still, or the seller has the right to back out on you. Now, if the seller backs out on you, you still get your earnest money back in that situation. But it's one of the only opportunities aside from negotiation of appraisal that the seller can back out on you and get out of the deal on you, basically. Or if something goes wrong with the inspection. Those are like the 3 areas that the seller can, in theory, proactively get out of the deal on you.
Yeah,
So
they'll send this over to us, and we
and
have
what
to
you would
verify all of it.
yeah, and what you would do, I always have clients, we always check will not, because if you're waiving your financing contingency, but your appraisal contingency hasn't happened, if you're not wanting to agree for the appraisal to be waived, it's not smart to also waive the appraisal contingency. So you're supposed to have your appraisal contingency survive if your financing's waived. So there's that one. If you want to make your offer stronger, and like, we're working with someone like Bryan, and like, let's say, assuming we have a let's say Bryan's like, hey Aaron, we're closing in 21 days. Awesome, fantastic, this is a strong offer. Well, what we would do in that situation, Bryan's like, hey, we're pre-underwritten, you're good to go, you're solid. But this is probably, there's no guarantees in life, don't lose your job, don't take your credit. What we would probably do as a baller move is you could say automatic waiver of financing after a certain amount of time. So you could maybe make that like after 15 days into the 21-day contract. So the final week, it drops off. Now here is the main risk of doing this is that means that final week, if something happens to your financing after that, in that final week period, seller gets your earnest money. You're not protected.
So let's talk about this for a second. You have a financing contingency because you want to protect yourself against unforeseen things that happen, which would then preclude you from getting financing, like Aaron said, changing, like losing your job. That's a big deal. Now, if you have a crappy lender and they didn't do a good job in the first place, that's not a. Did I lose you guys again?
No, I'm here.
Okay.
You good?
Yeah. Every time you get still, I get worried that I lost you. If you have a poor lender who doesn't verify things up front, issues a pre-approval letter, however, you were never pre-approved before you went into contract with the property, that is not the waiver of financing contingency. That's on your lender for you never really qualified for that. But the financing contingency saves you and your earnest money from unforeseen circumstances. The waiver of this now, things out of your control may happen to you where you can no longer finance this house before closing. Well, you've lost your earnest money. So it is like, pay attention when you and Aaron are sitting down going over this about the pros and cons of this form.
Yeah, exactly. 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Good. So these are things that you can do. Now, I just covered this a little bit, folks. If this is something that you
this is a 4-hour podcast.
So like everything we're covering in this, like we're trying to condense this. This is probably going to be our longest. We're going to be finishing this at an hour and a half once we're done. But it's everything that we've been talking about. Each item could be talked about for over 35 minutes, 40 minutes. Mm-hmm. So if you want to get with us after or whatnot and talk about your situation and each of these are things that I talk about my clients. We have a whole discussion about crafting the perfect offer when we're putting the offer together, and we go over all of that together. So just keeping you posted on how that works. Okay, so moving on from what you can do with your financing contingency to make it look better. You also can do one thing in here. One new thing that they've been doing, they just added this form last year, is in place of a financing contingency. So let's say you're like, hey, I know my financing is going to go through, or like, I don't, I don't, I like gambling. Um, you could do an appraisal addendum instead of a financing addendum. So what that means is basically you're making your offer contingent upon just the appraisal, not the financing. Uh, Riskier. I don't see that many people doing this when they have even strong financing. Um, but some people have been doing it. So that this is an optional form that they've thrown in here to protect you. And the reason why they throw this in here is two things. It protects you for an appraisal if you have strong financing and you want to just show the seller you have strong financing and risk it, or it protects cash buyers that want an appraisal contingency. Because most of the time, if you're a cash buyer, by default, if you're not throwing it in here, you have no appraisal done or an appraisal protection in the purchase and sale agreement. So that's why they made this form. Just not to go down a rabbit hole on that, but there's that form there. Okay, 22D. This is the optional clauses form, real quick. So we'll go through this real quick to skim this. This is like the don't sue your agent or the listing agent for if there was a measurement incorrection of what the property measurement is. No one actually measured the property, so you can read through that on your own. But here's one thing that you can do to this is an easy form to not check. So especially if the property's vacant, not checking to make the seller clean the property is an easy one. Like clean it yourself after you move into it. Now,
if it's vacant, you've seen it.
Yeah, you've seen it. You know, like you're probably gonna want to clean yourself anyways to know that it's cleaned the way you want it cleaned. You know, now if it's like if you're super concerned, like again, pack rat hoarder, a lot of stuff, you want to make sure they got it out of there. Maybe still check it, but like this is one of those like you're doing stuff to make it easy for the seller to accept your offer. So this is one of those things that you're just making it easy on the seller to accept your offer versus other people that making it harder on them to during their sale process. Let's see here. Was there anything else on this form that I wanted to point out? Let me double check my checklist here real quick. Nope, that was it. Okay, and then 22EF. So I don't have this in here, but that's fine. 22EF is the evidence of funds addendum. So if you are a strong offer where you are either a cash buyer or you are providing a lot of money down, or this is actually a good idea to do even if you have a little money down. Like anytime you're trying to make your offer look better, not only providing the proof of funds as far as the pre-approval letter from Bryan or the lender you're working with, but providing proof of funds as far as here's proof of my down payment, that helps your offer. So if you're like providing that up front, showing the seller, not only is my lender vouching for me saying that I have it, but like here's a copy of my bank statement. Don't forget to read back the numbers on it or anything, or anything like that. Anything that you can show the proof of funds that they actually do exist, that does help show proof that you have it, and that's going to improve the seller feeling good about your offer, right? 22J is the what this is a lead-based paint form. I don't want to get into this one too much. Most buyers just waive this one by default. This could be like a whole nother video, and maybe I'll just even make a YouTube video and pin the comment and say go to that and watch it sometime. But just if you're a buyer that's in a multiple offer situation, probably read through it, look into the pros and cons on it, but probably leave it. Don't eat paint. Okay, so
if you can learn anything from this podcast, it's don't eat paint, because if you do, you'll end up being on a real estate lending podcast in your future.
Okay, it's a man, Brian. I can make a whole video on why this opens up a can of worms if you go ahead with a lead-based paint addendum. Okay, so Form 34. Buyer. Oh, we already talked about this, so we already did that ahead of time. So we're already done with that. We talked about the release of earnest money. So now we're down to inspections. Okay, so I am a huge advocate for home buyers doing a home inspection. Like, do a home inspection, get a home inspection, know what the condition of the property is. Don't buy a property if you don't know the condition of the property. That being said, times are tough, y'all. Like, this is getting crazy out there, and especially what we were seeing during pandemic level competition, and it's heating up like in certain pockets, like in Bellevue, with craziness. Um, we're seeing areas where like buyers are waiving their home inspection left and right. To combat this, what you can do, there's a couple of options. If you're a home buyer that's like, I am not waiving my home inspection, like I will have a home inspection, I need to do it. I'm not that buyer that's insane enough to take that risk, which I advocate for you. I get it. Don't, right? There's a couple of things that you can do. One, it's the most common. Most of the time, the seller will let you do what's called a pre-inspection. So you fill out a form. It's the 35P here, where you as the buyer can pay for your own home inspection upfront. So you do inspection. Brian, you still with me, by the way?
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. See, that time you looked like you were frozen. Anyways, you do the home inspection up. You do the home inspection up front, and then you make your offer based on already what you know about the property. Now, here's the kicker, though. Some buyers are like, "Oh man, I didn't like what I found out in that home inspection." So some buyers are like, "Can I try to negotiate some stuff?" And it's like you can, but like if you're in a multiple offer situation, your offer is not going to win because the seller is now going to basically say, "Well, I don't want to accept this person that is coming to me with an offer with a list of things that they're asking me to repair versus these three other offers that have their inspection waived." You know, so it's a double-edged sword. So you might be in a situation where you do a pre-inspection and you just find out that that property wasn't for you and you're walking away from it. The biggest drawback to doing home inspections, or the biggest drawback that a lot of buyers face, is they, a home inspection, an individual one, they're not that expensive. They're between a few hundred to $600. There's the role voice of home inspectors out there. Like, I know there's some home inspection companies out there that charge, like, I've seen over $1,000 for home inspections, like just a general home inspection out there. Um, I'm not going to give my opinions on that. But Brian, what do you think? Anyways, not going to give a hot take on it, but you can find really good home inspectors that charge sub five for that do just as great a job as those companies that are doing the $1,000 that I know do a great job. And then there's a lot of home inspectors that do what's called a big ticket item pre-inspection. So they'll take a couple $100 off the price of the regular full meal deal home inspection, where they just check the big ticket items. They're just checking the stuff that you would seriously want checked. We're talking about foundation, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, structural. I guess structural foundations.
Roof.
Roof. You know, yeah, all that stuff. And that one, like $200-300, you can find someone that does that. But even that can add up, right? So some buyers have gotten savvy and they'll bring like a friend that's a contractor. So like just like there's things that you can do to like try to get savvy and figure out the condition of the home up front. Because if you get the permission, you get this form signed, you get someone in there, and you block out an hour time period to get that thing inspected before you make your offer. That's the pre-inspection. What's becoming more common, and this was very common, our team actually does this by default. We actually provide a home inspection on every one of our listings, because we want a buyer to we it's in our seller's best interest to go under contract with a buyer that has already done their inspection, to not back out on them. Is we provide a home inspection as a seller to the buyer. So, and this is becoming more common. You'll see this where there's some sellers that have paid for their own home inspection, or the agent pays for it, however, whatever their deal is with their listing agent. the seller or listing agent is providing a home inspection to any buyer that might be interested in seeing the property. Usually they'll provide it after the buyer has seen the property, either an open house or a showing. Um, and that could be another way of looking through those. Now, what I usually do with those is like with my buyers, they're like, "Hey, Aaron, have you heard of this company? Like, is it well known? Is it trusted?" So, like, I'll give my honest opinion on if I've worked with that inspection company before, or you know, how how detailed the report is, that kind of thing. So that's another way. That's another thing that you could be doing with the home inspection. If you absolutely are like, I can't do a pre-inspection, or I won't do it, and I'm not willing to accept the seller's inspection, and I'm not just going to gamble and waive my home inspection, I get it. One thing that you can do to make your offer a step above everyone else that's just doing a standard home inspection contingency, because again, I am not advocating waiving your inspection, folks. Like, I'm a big proponent of doing those home inspections. You can put on a form 34 that your home inspection is just what, like, you could put language in there that it's a pass fail home inspection, meaning like you would say like the buyer will not ask for any repairs. I always add to that, though. I say except for what the lender might require after the appraisal, because then I want to make the lender the bad guy, not us, just in case there's an appraisal work order. If the appraiser's calling out a work order that needs done, now it's a condition upon the loan, not what the buyer was necessarily asking for. This needs to get done in order to go through. Bryan, you got a take on that?
Always get a home inspection, even if the contract's not contingent upon it. It is not only are you going to find out some big things that might be wrong with your property, but if you never owned a home before, you're going to find out where the air filters are, where the water shutoff is, where the gas shutoff is, the maintenance that you have to do on a home. So even if I do not recommend waiving, pass, fail, great.
Yeah.
You're an adult making your own choice. Still get it, because it's going to teach you a lot about the house.
Yeah. I mean, you're going to say it's the best $500 I spent on
Absolutely.
this $500,000 property I bought, or $1 million.
Folks, yeah.
If you're on the east side buying these $1 million or $2 million homes, $500, even if you're paying that 6 times, like, come on, right? Like, that's gonna save you. I've seen $70,000 foundation issues, that you wouldn't have known about because you don't know, they're not visible when you're just walking through the home,
Mm-hmm.
So those are things that we advocate for, but those are tools in your toolbox about how to go about the inspection, what you can do, and a few different things that you can do to make your offer look better with the home inspection, and what you can do. So talk with your agent about different ones that you can use, and different ones are going to win the deal depending on what particular offer you get into. And like I said, I recon every time and figure out which one might be the best course of action depending on the multiple offer situation you're getting yourself into. So that being said, I think the last one we're going to talk about, okay, this is another big one. I don't like clients just offering, in a multiple offer situation, I don't like them offering an arbitrary amount above the list price. If the seller said, this is what I wanted for the house, this is what I was advertising to try to get multiple offers, like, you as a buyer, as a savvy buyer, like, let's say the house was listed at 500,000, I'm not advocating for a buyer to be like, I'm just gonna offer 600,000. Like, just like, you are.
First of all, no, of course not. We have been going over all day other ways that your offer can be strong outside of just price. So I hope that you guys got what Aaron just said. We don't just come in at the highest price all the time. We come in, we find the pain and the pleasure points of the person on the other side, so that we can give them as much pleasure points as possible to get them to want to say yes. And then once we're in contract, we're all on the same team going towards the same goal. But yeah, don't overpay for a house just because you're overpaying. And now you may have to go up to 600, but like, you also may not have to.
Yep, exactly. So the last thing I'm covering before Bryan got his bonus, and then we're peacing out, folks, because this has been on
I'm gonna have to go
thorough
fast,
podcast
guys.
today. Yep, is the escalation clause. So this is my favorite form. So the escalation clause allows you to bid on the home. So you, as a buyer, are allowed to go in there and say, okay, this is my starting price. This is my maximum I'm offering, and these are my increments I'm bidding on it. And you, as the seller, if my offer wins, you have to prove it to me that the other, by presenting to me the other real offer that I beat. So now I can read through it, and it's a homework assignment for them. So they have to fill this out. And then we have time to fact check and make sure that it was good. Um, if a seller's, some sellers are like, no escalation clauses, guys, that's weird. Like anytime a seller's like, I don't want escalation clauses, they're saying, I truly don't want the highest and best on my house. Like it's a weird thing, and it's a weird push. So I push back on it every time because here's the thing: submit the escalation clause still. Because if you're truly the highest and best, are they really not going to take your offer just because they had to do a little homework? I don't know. So I've won a couple of these, even when the agent said we're not going to look at the escalation clause. So anyways, folks, I'm throwing it out there because this allows you to not leave money on the table because it basically says I'm only beating the other guy by whatever your increment amount is. So if you said I'm only willing to beat the other guy by 5,000 or 10,000 increments, then at least you knew you didn't leave that crazy extra money on the table where you're like, I just offered 100K above list price for no reason. Now you didn't leave money on the table. So I'm throwing that out there. This is an awesome, powerful form to use on how to win in a multiple offer situation. And it's the form, it's like that band-aid you slap in there before you submit the offer because you're dealing with basically a silent auction where we assume that no matter how much good communication we did, the listing agent, I always assume, will never get back to me and we're just going to find out if we won or lose. Like, assume they're not going to give us another chance to improve our offer. Like, assume we got one shot to make the best offer possible and see what happens. A lot of people don't play games around here anymore. So that's it. That's what I got for you. Bryan, real quick, sorry, I know this was in depth. Give us your real quick, what's that product that you got for us? And then you can be.
So this is our appraisal protection insurance plan. I got to come up with a better name for it, but
here, let me remove this right now. Oh, Bryan removed himself. Okay, folks. What a tease, Bryan. What just happened? Oh man, guys. Okay, so what Bryan was gonna show you, just in case he doesn't come back into the room, before I log this off, just in case he doesn't come back, and maybe we'll throw this on the next one. Is he has like an appraisal protection program, and I might botch this really badly, but he has a product where it's really cool, where it basically protects the buyer and it would look really good for the seller. Where I think the buyer pays for it a little bit in their program. He can explain it a little. Oh, he's back. Okay, you're back. I was like, Bryan, what's going on? Okay, cool. Let me get rid of this. Stop my screen and then add yours in here.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, so let's go over this.
There you go.
This is our appraisal protection program, and I wanted to highlight how mortgage math is not regular math, okay? 2 + 2 = apple sometimes. And the scenario that I'm going to give you guys is somebody that's buying a house for $600,000 and they're putting 20% down. This works as long as you're putting 10% down on a conventional loan. And what we're guarding against is a low appraisal. So you can put in what Aaron went over, the 22 AD, the additional deposit for a low appraisal, and it not actually cost you anything. So these numbers are principals only, not an offer to lend, and it can work for anywhere from 10, as long as you're putting 10% down. And I want you to take a look at this. So this person's buying a house at 600 and they're putting 20% down. Their monthly payment's going to be $38.80 and their cash to close is $136.81, down payment plus closing costs. So let's say the appraisal comes in $40,000 low. Well, because we at the Laflamme Group are mathematicians, we're able to look at the terms of your loan, even though your loan to value is less than 80% that you had before. This is somewhere around 85% if it came in $40,000 low. So you have the same purchase price, you have the same interest rate, your payment is $24.50 higher. Your money due by closing is almost the exact same. Now, this is an appraisal that came in $40,000 low. So a lot of people will say, hey, if the appraisal comes in low, I don't want to put down an extra 40 grand. Well, you don't have to. Now, I'm not recommending that you overpay for a house ever. But if you're an adult who has all the information in front of you and you make a decision, then you're going to make a decision. And so And the appraised value is not the new comp when somebody goes and buys your neighbor's house. Your sales price is the next comp. So what if it comes in 10% lower, 60 grand lower, and you're at almost 90% loan to value? Well, you can see here that you have the $600,000 purchase price, the same interest rate. Your payment is almost exactly the same, in fact, a little bit cheaper, and your money due by closing is just a little bit more. So you have $1 payment higher than the 40K low appraisal and right around the same money due by closing. Now, this came in $60,000 below purchase price. You're not writing a $60,000 check. Over 5 years, you're actually only spending $4,700 more in cost than you would if the appraisal had come in at value. And the interest that you're paying over the first 15 years is almost identical. So you're paying about $7,000 more in interest over 15 years. So you're paying less than $500 a year more in interest over the first 5 years because you're financing a little bit more. If you want to find out exactly how we do this, all of our contact information is in everywhere that Aaron posts this. But what I wanted to show you was mortgage math is not regular math. And if you are putting at least 10% down on a conventional loan, don't be afraid to put in an additional deposit addendum to make your offer stand out. If you're worried that the appraisal may come in a little bit lower, take that worry off your plate that you're going to have to come in dollar for dollar with that difference. If you're conventional loan, at least 10% down, we have the Laflamme Group, this appraisal protection program, which would make your mortgage look like this. Your payment is the same. It's a $25 difference. Your money due by closing is the same. Your mortgage looks exactly the same to you. The way that we're able to work out how this happens, we're happy to go over with you personally because it can get a little bit in the weeds, but I just wanted to give you the overarching principal view of what this looks like. Low appraisal at 40K, low appraisal 60K, you're still having the same payment. You still have the same money due by closing. Pretty fancy, you guys.
That is amazing, protection Bryan. Program. Thank you so much for your patience. Thanks for everyone coming on. Bryan, this was the best turnout, by the way, with everyone coming in. So getting past that hour mark really had everyone just flooded. So thanks so much for everyone coming by. Bryan's got to go. I got to go. If you want to watch the clear version, everyone saw buffering because my T-Mobile tower was hit by lightning, by the way. The crystal clear HD version is recording of this is going to be on YouTube. Go to my YouTube channel. Go watch this. So playback, pause, rewind, all that good stuff. All right, again, realtor Aaron Morrow, local realtor, Greater Seattle area, King, Pierce, Snohomish counties, buyers and sellers. Bryan Laflamme Group, all of Washington, parts of Oregon, or all of Oregon now.
All of Oregon, Mississippi, and Georgia. So why not?
Holy, okay. See you guys later.